A while back, after watching some videos and seeing the discourse around Mavuika and Citlali, I predicted that the emerging narratives would become Mavuika needs Citlali, or Mavuika needs Citlali to melt. So, I made a video explaining why Citlali was overhyped, but I did so by taking shots specifically at videos from I Want to Lose and Ziox. That did not go over well, and my fears about people believing Citlali is needed came true. I, personally, have encountered it on YouTube, Twitter, my Discord, and even from the only person I ever see in real life that plays this game. So, against my better judgment, I decided I should give it another try. But this time, I'll keep it simple and just break down some teams for every character that can enable Mavuika to melt, and how Iansan, who happens to be on Mavuika's banner right now, changed everything. So, if you, and I know there are some of you, didn't pull for Mavuika because you were led to believe she needed Citlali, hopefully, by the end you'll see there are dozens of ways to play her in melt without Citlali. At the very least, you'll see some ways you can play Mavuika on one side and still have Citlali for your Nuvolette on the other. The number one criticism I got on my previous video was about Mavuika's different combos that allow Citlali to enable more melts. And they're right, there are combos that allow Citlali to do this, but why would that make you think Citlali is needed? If there are combos that allow for it with Citlali, maybe there are combos that allow it for other Cryo characters. Maybe there are characters that allow Mavuika to melt all of her meltable hits with the same combos that enable Citlali to do it. That brings us to our first option, Rosaria. Note that I've removed artifacts and put Mavuika on a level 1 weapon to keep Dorito Boy here alive to show the full rotation. Rosaria's first team will be Mavuika, Xilonen, Bennett, and Rosaria. You begin with Mavuika's skill, then Xilonen's skill, burst, and normal attacks until you hear that fat beat. Then burst and skill with Rosaria. Then burst on Mavuika and charge attack 4 times, jump, and charge attack until her burst ends. You might note this is the most basic combo used with Citlali as your Cryo option and allows Mavuika to melt all of her meltable hits, and Citlali doesn't allow the final hit to melt. One thing to point out before we move to the next Rosaria team is how Bennett limits your options when he's on the team. Bennett applies more pyro than most characters with both his skill and his burst, and this means your Cryo character is going to need to apply Cryo at least 4 times before Mavuika takes the field. You need to apply it 3 times to clear the pyro, and once so there's Cryo for Mavuika to melt against when she bursts. Rosaria does this without much issue. You have the initial cast of her burst, her skill hits and applies it 2 times, and by the time it's done, her burst is pulsed, applying it the 4th time. The timing can be a bit finicky, even with Citlali, because Mavuika's skill is active and can hit between the 3rd and 4th application, or during the swap. Either putting a pyro aura on the enemy causing your 4th application to melt instead and leave a pyro aura, or by clearing the aura just before Mavuika's burst hits. It's not going to happen all the time, but anyone who has paid attention while playing Melt Mavuika, even with Citlali, can tell you there are times when the melt just didn't happen. You'll also notice that Mavuika's burst isn't quite filled. It's actually lower than normal in these examples because I started off with 0 Fighting Spirit. You normally won't start off a rotation with 0 Fighting Spirit because Mavuika generates a little during her burst. As you can see in this Abyss clip, Mavuika generates a bit of Fighting Spirit during her burst. It's not quite enough to fill the cap without a second Natlin unit, but it's so close that even something as stupid as a Mualani skill, no stack normal attack, and burst can cap it from 0, and just a single normal attack can cap it from where it normally would be at the start of a rotation. That's what I was talking about when I was saying Citlali generates some amount less than 50 fighting spirit in a rotation in the previous video. Mavuika can't go over 200 fighting spirit. Shalonen generates some amount greater than 93 fighting spirit instantly, 90 from expending the full gauge, 3 from at least 2 normal attacks, and whatever amount is spent between casting her skill and expending the fighting spirit. And Mavuika gains 10 from using her burst in addition to some amount less than 80 from her skill. When I said Citlali was generating some amount less than 50 fighting spirit, I was being generous. It's not to say she can't expend more Night Soul, it's that Mavuika is so close to max with just Shalonen that every Natling character can cap it with minimal field time, and the excess does not become fighting spirit. That said, let's cap it. All we have to do is swap out Bennett for Kachina. This allows us to put Cinder City on Kachina and another support set like Instructors or Archaic Petra on Shalonen. Now we have more consistent uptime on Cinder City, and unlike the Citlali team where those buff sets on Shalonen are only active for the initial hit of Mavuika's burst because she's earlier in the rotation, we now have the buffs for Mavuika's charge attacks too. Our new rotation is Mavuika's skill, Kachina's skill and burst, Shalonen's skill, burst, and at least 2 normal attacks, Rosaria burst and skill, burst with Mavuika, and the same for CA, jump, and CA until the end of her burst we did before. We can technically get away with doing skill burst with Rosaria now, because we don't have to eat through Bennett's extra pyro, and Kachina is chipping away at some of Mavuika's, but burst skill is still a lot more consistent for now. Now for Iansan. Iansan changes everything. As you'll see later, there are characters that either can't enable Mavuika to melt at all, or that requires the more awkward setups with sacrificial weapons to do it. Iansan gets rid of all of that because rather than forcing your cryo unit to have 3 or 4 cryo applications before Mavuika takes the field, they only need 2 because instead of clearing pyro, Iansan's 3 hits of electro make it to where your cryo unit is clearing that instead of pyro, and it only takes 1 application of cryo to clear electro. Add on to that at C6 she's just better than Bennett in this team, and how quickly she generates and burns through Night Soul, Melt without Citlali is more accessible than ever. And hey, would you look at that, she's on Bennett right now. We're going to use Shalonen, but just to show you, you do cap Fighting Spirit with Kachina and Iansan. Until Iansan's release, you definitely want either Shalonen or Citlali, but now you really don't need either. Anyway, our new rotation starts the same as our Bennett rotation. Mavuika skill, Shalonen skill burst at least 2 normal attacks, and when we get to Iansan, we want to skill, then bursting will refill her Night Soul, and a single normal attack will trigger her max burst buff and apply electro. Then, this time, we will skill and burst with Rosaria, because that 4th application isn't necessary and it's more energy efficient for her. We started with Rosaria because she's one of the more brain-dead options next to Citlali, and that allowed us to explain the fundamentals for what Mavuika needs from a cryo unit. We'll touch on the specific benefits of every character at the end, but for now it's all about Melt, because that is the most important thing any cryo character brings to Mavuika. It's at minimum a 2x multiplier and increases to a 3x multiplier at just 306 EM. It's a significantly bigger boost than any amount of damage bonus, res shred, or attack any combination of characters and weapons provide. That was the main point I was trying to drive home in my original video and this video. Citlali enables Melt. That's the most important thing she does by far, and she's not even close to being the only one that does it. Moving on, we have Charlotte. For the Bennett team, we'll go Mavuika skill, Shalon skill, burst, at least 2 normal attacks, Bennett skill and burst, then Charlotte hold skill, normal attack, and burst. Now, because Charlotte's skill application is a bit different than Rosaria or Citlali's, we'll have to adjust our Mavuika's combo. How? Burst, then jump after the 3rd normal attack instead of the 4th, and charge attack until the burst ends. Just like with Citlali, this allows Mavuika to melt every meltable hit except for her final slam. Moving on to the Kachina team, we no longer need Charlotte's burst. So even without her C4, you can get away with running TTDS, but the combo is even more finicky. Mavuika skill, Kachina skill and burst, Shalon skill, burst, at least 2 normal attacks, then Charlotte hold skill and normal attack. When you get to Mavuika, burst, wait for the Cryo aura to appear, then do 2 charge attacks. Jump and charge attack until her burst ends. Keep in mind, you may not need Charlotte's burst anymore, but you should still use it before swapping out if it's up. It'll make things a lot cleaner. For Iansan, you've really got to pay attention if Charlotte's burst isn't up. Start with Mavuika skill, then Shalon skill, burst, at least 2 normal attacks, then skill, burst, and normal attack on Charlotte. If there is an Electro aura, hold skill with Charlotte and make sure to release it immediately once it's maxed. If there is no aura, normal attack before holding her skill. Just like before, if her burst is up, use it before swapping out. Then Mavuika burst, then 2 charge attacks, jump, 2 charge attacks, jump, and charge attack until her burst ends. Next, we have Escoffier. But her red shred doesn't work. I said I was doing every character that enables Mavuika to melt. And it turns out, Escoffier is just as brain dead as Citlali. In all 3 team cores, you just play them like the other teams and skill and burst when you get to Escoffier. Then for CA, jump and CA until Mavuika's burst ends. Boom. Now, let's move on to someone kind of interesting. Ganyu. In both the Bennett and Kachina teams, you'll do the rotation as normal until you get to Ganyu, where you'll skill, burst, and do a fully charged charge attack. The charge attack is less necessary with Kachina. As you see in the clip, we were maintaining a Cryo aura without it, but it's still the most consistent setup. Then your standard Mavuika burst, 4 CA, jump, and CA until the burst ends. With Iansan, it's the same thing, but now we only need to skill and burst on Ganyu. Layla is also an option in all 3 variants, but now we're getting into characters that require sacrificial weapons in some of them. For the Bennett team, same setup until Layla, then skill, burst, skill, and swap to Mavuika and burst. Wait until you see the Cryo aura, then 4 CA, jump, and charge attack until the end. We no longer need Sack Sword for Kachina and Iansan. It's the same setups, but when you get to Layla, do burst and skill. And then you burst with Mavuika, 4 CA, blah 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 blah. Moving on to the last character that can get more than 1 or 2 melts with Bennett on the team, Diona. But her Bennett team is pretty jank. By now you should know the first 3 characters will be the same every time, so I'm just going to skip that part and talk about the Cryo character and Mavuika's combo with them. For Diona, you must have Sackbow, and you'll want to do 2 hold skills followed by her burst. Then things get dumb. Burst with Mavuika, wait for the Cryo. 2 charge attacks, jump, wait for the Cryo. 2 charge attacks, jump, wait for the Cryo, then charge attack until the burst is over. Kachina and Iansan are almost the same with 2 key differences. One is that you no longer need Sackbow with Iansan, i.e. you only need 1 skill use. double hold the skill for the Kachina team, or one hold skill for the Iansan team, then burst, and burst with Mavuika, and in the Kachina team, you'll wait for the Cryo and do 3 charge attacks, jump, wait for the Cryo, then charge attack until the burst ends. For the Iansan team, it's the same, but do 2 charged attacks instead of 3 at the start of her combo. Now, moving on to our first character that's incompatible with Bennett, Kaya. Kaya requires Sack Sword for Kachina, and will do skill, burst, skill. Then do your burst, 4 CA, and so on with Mavuika. Kaya no longer needs Sack Sword with the Iansan team, and the setup is identical except you just do burst and skill on Kaya. Lastly, we have Shinha. You'll do burst and skill with both Kachina and the Iansan, but for Kachina, you'll do your 4 CA combo with Mavuika, and with the Iansan, you'll do 3 CA, jump, 3 CA, jump, and charge attack until the burst ends. And that's every character that can enable a meaningful amount of melts for Mavuika on their own. You can also run double Cryo with any combination of these characters and just not even really think about the setups while having Cryo resonance because there is Cryo on the enemy. I still don't understand why people got mad at me for saying that in the previous video, but it's still true. Now, let's break down the pros and cons for each character. First, Citlali. Pros. She's the best option. Not by a lot, and we'll touch on that in a bit, but she is undeniably the best. She gives 20% Red Shred, except not really, and this is another thing people got mad at me for, so let me attempt to explain it a little better. Nearly every enemy in the game has 10% pyro resistance. For the ones that don't, most of the time you just wouldn't bring a pyro team against them anyway. Red Shred is half as effective below 0, meaning even if Citlali is your only form of Red Shred, i.e. you aren't using Xiaolonen, Zhongli, or a VV Shredder, she will almost always be reducing resistance by 15%. If you are using literally any other form of Red Shred, since she's last in the rotation, she will only be reducing resistance by 10%. It is misleading to claim she reduces resistance by 20%, and anyone you see doing calcs of enemies with 100% resistance, so she or a Scoffier or anyone else can get their full amount, is doing bad theory crafting, because that is a scenario you simply won't encounter in game. And unless it's against this jerk, since he has high res to all elements, it doesn't make any sense to bring a pyro team against an enemy that specifically has high resistance to pyro. An enemy like the Pyro Regisvine, for instance, has 70% pyro resistance, meaning you're doing 60% less damage than you normally would at a baseline. Do you want to do less than half the damage you normally would just so you can get the full 20%? I'd hope not. Next pro, she has shield, but this one comes with another asterisk. Because you may not have heard this, it's actually really weak. With 1000 EM, which you probably won't have with TTDS, it only has 12.6 thousand HP. And ER Sans, Tank Fae, with Prototype Amber, has 14.7 thousand. Speaking of TTDS, Pro, she can use supporting catalysts like TTDS, Thousand Floating Dreams, and her signature. No notes there, it's just a straight boon. Pro, Night Soul Generation. As your only Natlan character, your rotations after the first will generate nearly as much fighting spirit as Xiaolonen as your only other Natlan character. But you will have to do some NAs on Mavuika to get her burst at all in the first rotation for something like Stygian. Pro, That initial hit of her burst hits like a truck. Cons. Really none aside from you might not have her. But you could say that for any character here aside from Kaya. Rosario. Pros. She also has really easy setups. She follows the same combo and gives an extra melt. She also gives a crit rate boost and does solid damage. Cons. Her burst is stationary, and polearms only recently gained access to a non-fab support weapon in the form of Escoffier's signature, and it doesn't really work on her. Charlotte. Pros. She's been free a few times. She isn't burst reliant in double Geo or with Iansan. She can hold supportive catalysts. Cons. You kinda need C4 to use those weapons with Bennett. Her setups are jank, and getting hit while holding her skill will ruin your day. Escoffier. Actually, and I'm gonna get some flack for this, but no notes? Easy melt enabler, solid damage. I guess a con is that if you ever want to play freeze with anyone but Nouvelette, and I could go off about the yay Nouvelette buff nonsense, but I'll save that for another day. You'd always rather her be on that team than use her with Mavuika. Diona. Pros. She can run Elegy in the Iansan team. She gives an EM buff, and she provides a weak shield and weak healing, and is a good character to put Song of Days Past on. Cons. Please, no, don't do it. There are people that care about you. You have no idea how irritating it is to use her in this slot. Ganyu. Pros. Way better than I think anyone could have suspected. Relatively easy setups, especially with Iansan. Can run Elegy. Burst does a ton of damage. The AoE is huge, and Taunt helps to CC enemies. Cons. Having to charge attack without Iansan. Kaya. Pros. Everyone has him. Cons. Doesn't work with Bennett because his only setup requires him to burst and then do 2 skills with Sack Sword, leaving almost no uptime on the burst for Mavuika, and requires Sack Sword with Kachina. Layla. Pros. Relatively easy setups. She can run Ki. Shield is strong. Can run Tenacity. Cons. She needs Sack Sword with Bennett, and needs to be close enough to enemies to apply Cryo with her skill cast with Bennett and Kachina. If the shield breaks before you do Mavuika's burst, you're kinda SOL. Shinha. Pros. Skill gives bonus damage percent to burst. Setups are pretty easy. Cons. Doesn't work in the Bennett team, and requires getting her burst as a solo Cryo unit. And I think that's everything. Hopefully, if you have Mavuika and have avoided trying Melt because you thought you needed Citlali, you can see that she's far from necessary and is by no means someone you need to pull to do it. Hopefully, I rectified my mistakes in how I approached this in the previous video and was able to provide some helpful insight into Mavuika's team building and won't be crucified this time around. Time will tell, I guess.
Controlled breathing.